Hello, everyone. We are super excited, Jasmine and I. We have a wonderful spotlight that is joining us today. So, ChiBizHub welcomes Miss Kenya Merritt. She is the Chief Business Officer. Say it again, Chief Business Officer for the Department of Business Affairs and Consumer Protection. We are so excited that you are able to join us for our July spotlight. So before we get into some of the questions, Jasmine and I are just super grateful that you're able to join us, and we really appreciate you taking time out of your busy schedule to just have a conversation with us, so that people can really learn more about you and the work that you've been doing with the city of Chicago. So, with that being said, Kenya, we just want you to share with us how did you actually get started with the city of Chicago, and then how did you become the chief business officer for business affairs and consumer protection?
That's an interesting question. And I always start by saying, I've worked with the city for 20 years now. And yes, I started when I was like 5 years old. And it's a really interesting story. I'll go back a little bit and talk about like how I, started to become interested in public service. And it all started in undergrad many, many moons ago. I wanted to become a pediatrician. And so when I started college, so the academic advisor went through all of the requirements that were necessary to be pre-med. And so it was a ton of science and math classes. And I was like, this is not for me. I have to figure out something. So I spent about a year and a half in undergrad just trying to figure out where my interests were. What was I excited about? What was I passionate about? And I ended up taking this political science class. And in this class, we had to do a paper on a famous local politician from wherever we were from. And of course, I'm from Chicago, grew up in North Lawndale. And of course, a politician that I decided to do my paper on was Harold Washington. And although I was just very, very small when he won his first election, the memory of that election was just so prevalent in my mind that I knew that I had to do a paper on him. And so while doing this paper, I was like, oh my God, like I am so interested in public service and helping people, and decided to major in political science. And so shortly after undergrad, my dream was to be able to work on the Hill, to work in DC, to do a lot of policy work. But unfortunately that didn't happen. A lot of jobs in DC require that you have an internship and that it's unpaid. I was not in a position to work for a full summer and not be paid. That I wasn't set up that way. My family wasn't made that way. So I decided to come back to the city, and I ended up applying for an administrative role with the city of Chicago very shortly after I graduated. And then a full year later, they ended up calling me in for an interview. And I started my career in the city's Office of Budget and Management, which I say was the best place to start. If anyone is interested in public service, in my opinion, the budget office or the mayor's office are really great places to start, because you get a bird's eye view of just city government and what all of the different departments do. So started with the city's Office of Budget and Management, and moved throughout the city in various departments, lots of different roles. And my last role before this role, I was the CFO for the Department of Cultural Affairs and Special Events. An amazing job. And so I got a call. I was literally sitting in the cultural center, and the view from my window is Millennium Park. So I could see Pritzker Pavilion, I could see Cloud Gate. So it's absolutely beautiful. I'm super excited about the work that I'm doing. Feel that it's very impactful, and it's in an amazing space, the cultural center. And so I get a call to say, hey, would you like to have a conversation about this role as a small business officer? And I'm like, sure. Like, I'm happy where I am, but would love to have a conversation about it. And so things just ended up working out. And what really drew me to the role was the ability to take all of the skills that I had gained in my previous positions throughout the city and to merge them into this role as a small business officer with helping entrepreneurs throughout the city, which ultimately helps our neighborhoods. And that's the part that really drew me to this role.
Thank you for that, Kenya. Actually, I mean, head start to our next question. We're curious to know a little bit more specifically about the current role that you're in right now. I think, you know, Kendra and we always love to spotlight, right, our small business owners and entrepreneurs. And you being with BACP as our business resource provider, I think it's good for our audience to know exactly what you bring, you know, to our neighborhoods and to our audience.
So thank you for that. Yeah, you guys have been amazing partners. I worked previously with Kendra when she was in the city of Chicago in the mayor's office, and she was such an amazing partner. Actually, she helped me when I started in this role, just being able to navigate the different relationships. We all know that in order to be effective in what you do in Chicago, relationships are key. And so it was her and her team that really helped to connect me with different people throughout the city that were doing great work, especially as it related to business development. So a little bit about my role. I like to put it into 3 different buckets. The first bucket is community engagement and outreach. So I spend a lot of my time talking with business owners, talking with entrepreneurs, talking with organizations that support entrepreneurs to figure out where are the gaps, where are the challenges that are impeding growth, or areas where we need to improve upon as a city, or just in general, the ecosystem of supports for businesses and what can we do to fix those things. And so we take in that information and we do that in a variety of ways. So we have coffee conversations, which I absolutely love. We haven't been able to do those for the past couple of months because of COVID. But now that things are reopening, I'm super excited about being able to be out to support our businesses, but also to start to have these conversations again. And so what we glean from those conversations, we take back in and we start to develop policies or programs that we feel will address some of the issues or challenges that we're hearing from the community and that we're hearing from business owners. That's the second thing. The third role that I have is overseeing our grants program, where we provide funding to about 70 different organizations throughout the city of Chicago that are providing business development support to entrepreneurs in their communities. And I will say that of all the roles that I have, that's probably one of my favorite because we're working with amazing organizations. And many of these organizations are on the ChiBizHub platform. And so if people are looking for resources or support, they can always plug into ChiBizHub and get connected to these organizations. But what's really amazing is that you have people in community that are really committed to growing their neighborhoods, to getting their neighborhoods back to the vibrancy of where they were many years ago, and in some cases even just sustaining it and taking it to the next level. And so it's really cool for me to be able to have an opportunity to work with some amazing people that are really passionate about helping small businesses, but then just a whole economic development landscape in their community. So that's what I do.
Awesome. So you actually answered the next question that we had, and we wanted to know about some of the programs that you were leading and which program you were most passionate about. So you kind of touched upon that. So I want to actually,
I want to talk a little bit more about that. So, going back to just like some of the things that like we hear and we learn from business owners and entrepreneurs. So one of the things that we actually did together when I first started was we had a luncheon with African American women business owners. And what was so cool about it was that it bookended Black History Month, but it was also the start of Women's History Month. And so we had this conversation with a small group of women. It had to be about 15 amazing Black women entrepreneurs throughout the city in all different sectors. The conversation was great just to hear from them. But one of the things that we heard that was pretty consistent from the women was the ability to be able to be in the same space with each other. And so even at that luncheon, it was scheduled for a short period of time, but the women ended up hanging out for such a long time. We were like, this is great. But what we learned was that, there was value in just being connected, right? So even beyond some of the issues that we know are prevalent for entrepreneurs, particularly entrepreneurs of color, access to capital, access to resources, access to experts, right? Whether it's marketing or accounting, but the value of being connected with one another. And so we felt like that was low-hanging fruit for us, right? Like that's something that we could immediately help with. And so we started to pull together just the opportunities for women to be in the same space with each other, to learn from one another. And we ended up hosting a series of workshops as well as a series of events that were targeted towards women. And the feedback that we received was just outstanding. So that's one initiative that I'm just absolutely proud of and would love to think about how we continue to move forward with that in light of COVID. So I'm super, one of the things that I'm always excited about is just like, how do we look at what's happening in society, in the world, in our economy, and how do we develop content and workshops that's relevant and that's helpful to entrepreneurs. And so one of the things that we're thinking about now, and the marketing and outreach team, I think they love and hate me because I'll come up with ideas and I'm like, I have an idea, like, let's switch it up and do it this way, right? So in light of COVID, what we've been hearing from business owners is that, this feels very much like a startup, right? Like, so for businesses that have been in business for 10, 20 years, like after being closed or having reduced services for 10 to 12 weeks, restarting, this feels like a brand new startup, right? And so for us, I'm thinking about just like our content and how we can shift it so that it's relevant to the business owners and that they're getting the support that they need from us as they move towards resiliency. And so it's so funny, I had like this crazy name about just like how we could shift like our education series. It was called, the first name I thought about was like Road to Recovery. And I have a 17-year-old son and he's like, that's lame. So rethinking the branding, but those are the things that really get me excited. Is just like, how can we be innovative and creative, but also ultimately the goal is to help people. And the goal is to have our businesses to stick around because we know that they are the cornerstone to our communities. And I can't say that enough. Again, one of the things that, going back to one of the questions that you said earlier, one of the things that really interested me about this job is, I grew up in North Lawndale, and I won't say how long ago, but back in the day, like my neighborhood was so vibrant with Black businesses. Like we had a record store, we had a roller rink, we had all of these amazing businesses, and now it's very much different than what it was when I was younger. And so how do we get back to a place where we can, one, start to see business grow, but then also see businesses be a little bit more sustainable, the ones that are still existing in our neighborhoods. And so that's one of the things that excites me about this role.
That is awesome. And yes, you definitely are passionate about the work that you do. So Jasmine and I see that every time we work with you and we have a project. So we appreciate that. Now, for my next question, you did answer it a little bit. So I know you mentioned that you were interested in actually being a pediatrician at one point in your life, and now you are a public servant. So there's a reoccurring theme of service. So talk a little bit about why is service something that you want to do, because essentially it still is the career path that you have chosen.
Yeah, so I think it's just innate, right? Like some things just are a part of your fabric and a part of your DNA and just who you are. And, to tie the two together, I think that's absolutely right. I think I've always had a desire to be helpful. And so that is a part of who I am, that leads the work that I do. And I think just my connectedness to my neighborhood and to Chicago really helps to inform just like the work that I do, right? Like, so having grown up in North Lawndale, now living in Austin, but having experienced the North Side for a hot second, being able to take those lived experiences, and apply it to the work that I do just feeds my passion, to want to make sure that we're living in a city that's equitable, and that's just amazing for everyone, no matter where you live. Like, your access to education, your access to businesses, your access should not be based upon your zip code or your community area. And so whatever little work that I can do in my role to help with that, like, that is what drives the work that I do every day.
Love that. Love that. Thank you, Kenya. We're going to pivot a little bit to kind of more the time and space that we are in right now. And we're curious to know, obviously, as it relates to your job, what have you been hearing from businesses as Chicago has entered, phase 4 reopening? What has been the most challenging for them?
Again, I think that one of the things that we're hearing, and there's a variety based upon the sector, is being able to just restart, right? Like, it's literally starting all over. So, building back your customer base. So whether you had a boutique or a coffee shop, the culture of people being out, or consumer behavior, is very different than what it was prior to COVID, right? So people are a little bit cautious, right? Like, so while I, prior to COVID would have go out and have my daily coffee, now I'm using my Keurig, right? So consumer behavior is really different. So how do you continue to market and engage your customer base to essentially grow it, right, in this new reality? And so some of our business owners are finding that to be a challenge. The other thing that I think many of our business owners are challenged with, and again, I think this is a challenge for many of our entrepreneurs of color, is just like, how can you leverage technology as a part of your business model, right? And I've shared this before, is that, when the stay-at-home order happened, it felt like it happened so quick. And I'll never forget that the night before it happened, my phone was literally off the hook with business owners asking, what does this mean for me? Like, I am not going to survive. I have all of this inventory in the case of restaurants, and now you're telling me that I can't have people to come in and to dine. And so they didn't have the platform or the systems in place for delivery or for pickup. And so, what I've encouraged businesses to do, and this is even for me, I've said this even for me professionally and personally, that during this 12 weeks to kind of just you've had those moments where you kind of just reevaluated your life and you figured out where there are gaps or where there are areas that you wanted to improve upon, right? The same goes for business, right? It's an opportunity for you to figure out, because of COVID, I wasn't able to do X, Y, and Z. So moving forward, what do I need to put in place so that if this happens again, I'm in a better position? And God, I pray that we don't have a second wave. But again, I would just encourage business owners to take this time to kind of self-evaluate. Also think about, are there other opportunities? And this is something that I think Andrea Missop has said before, is where there are opportunities for growth in different sectors or industries post-COVID, like for people to start thinking about those as well. Like, what do you do in your current business model that can shift or pivot that can now be more profitable based on this new reality?
Yes, that's a great point. And so you actually you're doing really great with answering the question to our next question. So when you think about the pandemic and when the pandemic began, did you still see people applying for business licenses? And if so, can you kind of share with us any trends, or are there any particular industries that you see that actually have seen an increase in people applying for business licenses in Chicago?
Well, I wouldn't say necessarily an increase in business licenses, but I will say that we have seen an increase of people getting different types of licenses, right? And so where where you may have a restaurant that never even thought about having a sidewalk cafe, now they are getting a sidewalk cafe license. I've had an entrepreneur that is also in the food related business, and she shifted from catering to meal prep. And so just like people, again, thinking differently about their business models, taking what they have and then figuring out, based on this new reality, how do I need to tweak it? How do I need to pivot so that I can operate in this new reality and what's working, right? And so for a restaurant or a coffee shop to now, think about, like, it's safer for people to be outside, right? So how can I just, add a couple of tables and chairs where it's allowable to the sidewalk to expand, my footprint, because I can only have a certain amount of capacity within inside, but then also to give people the ability to be able to pick up food and dine outside. Everyone knows summertime shy dining al fresco is just rooftops, and dining al fresco in Chicago in the summer is like one of my favorite things to do. So how do you take what people love to do and then make it profitable for your business?
I love that. Thank you. You're such a wealth of knowledge. And we really appreciate, you taking the time to kind of chat with us, not just about, like, your role in just public service, but also, obviously really important information that I think our entrepreneurs and small business owners want, right? So to close us out, we're really curious to know what kind of advice you have for someone that's, interested in potentially, a career in public service. And you kind of touched upon it a little bit in the beginning, how like you wanted to go to DC, but like that didn't happen. And so I think it's important for you to kind of talk a little bit about that.
Yeah, so for me, whether it's public service or whether it's an entrepreneur, like, I would say just follow your passions. What is it that you're excited about? What is it that is true to who you are as a person? And stay committed, right? Like, it's not always hard. It's not always easy. And although sometimes we make it look easy and we make it look like it's enjoyable 100% of the time, most of the time it is, but there are a lot of times where it's really difficult and really challenging. But when you're passionate and you're excited about something, you tend to stay committed to it. So find your passion, stay committed, and be impactful.
Well, that concludes the questions that Jasmine and I had, Kenya. And again, we're just so grateful that you were able to take time to speak with us. We hope that our entrepreneur community does tune in to the spotlight to just hear all of the knowledge that you shared. And we know that Business Affairs and Consumer Protection still has workshops. So did you want to share a little bit about that to close us out so that our community will know about their education, the educational piece that you offer?
Yeah, so the workshops are actually so bomb and dope, guys, like, and they're free. So the practitioners that do the workshops are actually experts in their field. So we hold workshops every Wednesday and every Friday. Typically, those will be at City Hall. But what's been really amazing about COVID is that we've now pivoted to doing those virtually. So where we could probably only have 50 people in our little conference rooms at City Hall, now we can expand our reach to so many more people, and folks are able to watch it in the comfort of their home. They don't have to get on the train, come downtown. So love the ability to be able to do this online. And as I mentioned, we are exploring a new workshop series that I'm super excited about. It won't be named Road to Recovery because that is lame, but we will have a workshop that will be targeted towards businesses that are looking to recover still from COVID, and we hope to launch that in August. We'll also be doing our first ever virtual expo. So again, we typically had small business expos. We would do 5 a year. We would do those in different neighborhoods throughout the city. So we'll have our first virtual one on the 16th, which is next Thursday, and we're super excited. We should have an amazing keynote speaker lined up for that one. So be on the lookout. And please follow us on all of our social media platforms. It's at Chicago BACP. And you'll learn more about some of the work that we're doing, as well as get regular updates on what's happening with reopening with the city of Chicago. But I want to thank you and Jasmine for the invitation. This has been great. All we needed was just like a cup of coffee, or if it was a Saturday morning, maybe a mimosa. But I appreciate you guys having me out to have this conversation with you all.
Awesome. Thank you again for joining. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Thanks.